Hello, and welcome to another episode of Free Your Story, Free Your Life. My name is Amy Kochek, and I come to you in a bit of a somber mood today. I'm actually shocking myself that I'm doing a podcast episode today. I had therapy earlier today. I feel like I've been crying for nearly 12 hours. My eyes feel puffy, my head is hurting, and I feel very drained. And for some reason, I felt like now would be the perfect time to do a podcast episode. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode is because I feel a little frustrated at myself, at society in general, at what's become of us as the human race who believes that the highest level of development and a sure sign and marker that you are emotionally healthy and mature is proclamations of happiness and joy and tangible evidence of success. And if you don't have those things, and if you show up sad, or you show up somber, or you show up in pain, that you are in need of fixing, that someone needs to fix you. And actually, you need to fix yourself because you're messing up the mood, you know? And I don't share this, I don't share this as in any way, a negative perception on when people check on you when you're sad, right? Like, if I do a podcast episode and I'm sharing all these wonderful things and I'm smiling and I'm laughing and I'm happy and I'm telling you all these amazing things that are happening in my life, nobody for sure is going to contact me and say, Amy, is everything all right? Are you good? Because I noticed that like you were really happy on that last episode. Like, what can I do? What can I do to make you less happy? How can I change that for you? Right? Like, I'll never get messages like that. But when I show up and I show up as my genuine self, that is 100% my desire at all times, to show up just as me. That when I talk about my pain and I talk about my vulnerabilities and I share my sorrow, that I have a lot of people who reach out. And I love it so much. You know, I love when people check on me, right? Why do we believe that pain needs to be fixed and needs to be eradicated from our lives? When we look back over the story of our lives, when we look back at the pivotal changing moments in our lives, those usually didn't happen during the celebrations, and they usually didn't happen at really high points in our lives. And I can almost guarantee that who you are today, the character that you have, the work ethic, the drive, the personality, so much of that was etched out during times of suffering and during times of pain and during times when things didn't always make sense. The thing that sometimes frustrates me about social media in general is that when someone decides to share their vulnerabilities or when someone decides to bring us into their sadness as a collective, and I'm not saying everyone because I feel like there is somewhat of an involvement, but as a collective, there seems to be a demonization of these types of people. Like, as you know, when celebrities show up and they're crying, or when we see certain sides of our favorite personalities and they're sharing their pain or they're sharing things that they go through, it's like a lot of times we demonize people for that. And when people are at their lowest, we're judging them. We are itemizing their pain. We're saying whether their pain is valid or not. And it's like, As a collective, the more that we do this, the message that we're sending out to people is leave that shit at home. Like, don't bring that shit out into public. We don't want to see that. We don't want to see your pain. We don't want to see you crying. We don't want to hear about your trauma. Like, don't mess up the vibe. Don't bring down our energy. Like, only bring the happy. Only bring the joy. Only bring the you at 10. And then you know what happens? This is what happens. We become a people who literally hide any emotion that is not attractive to our surroundings, to what we're seeing, to what is praised, right? And the things that are praised is positivity, and the thing that's praised is happiness and joy. And we have all these mantras, and we have all these solutions to keep you in a state of joy. But then what happens is that it's just a bunch of dressed up trauma. That's not genuinely joy. It just looks good. We just learn how to make it look good. I remember in the Bible, Jesus taught one of my favorite scriptures actually. Jesus talks about these Pharisees. And the Pharisees were the very educated, very spiritually, religiously sound, let me say. Like, they understood the law very well. Like, they lived to the letter of the law, and they made it look really good. And then they would teach it, like they're sharing it, and they're presenting this side of religion, the side that looks good, right? But Jesus, when he was teaching on the Pharisees, he didn't like the Pharisees. And he was saying, when he was commenting about the Pharisees, he was saying, you should listen to what the Pharisees are saying, because conceptually, like, intellectually, they get it. But they're not really living it. They don't know how to live it. So what they are is that they're like whitewashed tombs. On the outside, they look really good. They look really put together. It looks really nice. But on the inside, they're filled with dead man's bones. And I feel like as a society, we are showing up as these whitewashed tombs. We're showing up with our best. We're showing up with the good news. We're showing up with the happy emotions, the positivity, the quotes that we've been fed by these spiritual gurus. We're showing up with the best practices. We're showing up with the teaching, the charisma, the same way that we do in the religious world. We're showing up and it looks so good. And we can perform it, and we can do it so well, and we can memorize it, and we can match energy. We can create courses from it. We can create an entire business from it. But when it comes time for us to go home, and when it comes time for us to actually live it, we're not doing it. We're just not. And that's why even in the quote unquote woke spiritual realm, right? Like all these spiritual gurus who are speaking out against dogmatic religion, all I see them do is exactly what the religious dogmatic world is doing, only on the other spectrum. And now they have all these followers who are just looking for something to believe in. So it's like, feed me all the teaching, feed me all the concepts, feed me all the best practices, and I'll do it. And I'll look the best spiritual aspect and part of myself. But when I go home, I'm still silently struggling. That's why you can have some influencers who are who are married and who are out here giving the best talks and giving the best practices, and then 2 years later they're getting divorced. That's why you can have ministers and preachers out here who are charismatic, and they're some of the best teachers in the world, but when you open up their homes, you see that they're beating up their wives, or they're molesting their children, or you look at these motivational speakers who are out here writing books and giving the best talks of their life. But when you ask them about those time periods, while they're producing this information, while they're putting a standard for us to live by, and they're telling us, if you do this, then this will happen, right? They're becoming best-selling authors, but when they start dialoguing about their lives, they're on medication because they're so depressed. Who are we fucking trying to impress? Like, I'm tired. I feel like the thing that I love best about my life right now is that my life is painful to me right now because I'm in a transition. And I know this. I can dialogue you through exactly what I know is going on with my life. And I've been through it before. Anytime life is transitioning for me. And I had a friend that described it like this to me, and it was so beautiful that I held on to it, and now I describe it like this. It's like my life is a puzzle right now. And I'm looking at all these pieces on the ground, and visually the pieces look beautiful, right? Because it's like I'm kind of seeing the designs on each of the puzzle pieces. That it's visually appealing to me. But I have no reference picture for what this thing is supposed to look like. And also, as beautiful as it looks, is just as chaotic as it looks, all at the same time. When I look at it, it's pure chaos, but also I know it's beautiful. So when I see it like that, I go through these varying emotions, right? Like some mornings I look at it and I choose to see the beauty, right? And it's like, God, this is beautiful. And I'm allowing myself to lean into the beauty, and I'm allowing myself to believe in something greater, and I'm allowing myself to really enjoy the uncertainty of this moment and the beauty that's going to come on the other side of it, right? And also realizing that, like, I'm looking at all these pieces and it's beautiful, and realizing, oh, this could go in many different directions. Like, I'm actually the person that gets to decide what this looks like. And that's really exciting, right? But that's on one day. But then on other days, I wake up and I don't feel like looking at the beauty. And I don't feel like getting excited because I am the orchestrator of this puzzle. Some days when I wake up, I'm so fucking angry. And I think I would like a reference picture. I would like, first of all, I want this put back together. Whoever's idea was to take it apart, you need to put it back together. I want certainty and I want answers, and I want it now. And also, I'd like to punch someone. And there's days when I feel like that, right? Because right now, that's where my life is at. Right now, that's where I'm at. And I don't want anyone to say to me, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, what do I need to do? What do we need to do to fix this?" I don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be fixed. Anyone who told us we need to be fixed needs a solid FU, because that's how we got here. This idea of, if my feelings and my life doesn't fit a narrative that's been fed to me, then I need to be fixed. We don't need to be fixed. I was reading this book, and I'm going to read this passage to you. This was a while ago. So this book is called Love Warrior by Glennon Doyle. And she followed this book up with Untamed. Great book, by the way. Both of these books are really great. But When I read her book, this was the first time I had ever heard anyone speak of pain in this way. And it was so refreshing to hear her or to read these words. It was so encouraging. And I want to share them with you. So she says, we think our job as humans is to avoid pain. Our job as parents is to protect our children from pain. And our job as friends is to fix each other's pain. Maybe that's why we all feel like failures so often, because we all have the wrong job description of love. What my friends didn't know about me and I didn't know is that people who are hurting don't need avoiders, protectors, or fixers. What we need are patient, loving witnesses. I'm going to say that again. What we need are patient, loving witnesses. People to sit quietly and hold space for us. People to stand in helpless vigil to our pain. And then she goes on to talk about pain a little bit more, which this part I also love. She was talking about how pain is our greatest teacher. Pain is our professor. Pain is a school that we attend because that's where we're about to learn. That's where we're about to grow. And it says, what if my anger, my fear, my loneliness were never mistakes? What if they were invitations? What if in skipping the pain, I was missing my lessons? Instead of running away from my pain, was I supposed to run toward it? Perhaps pain was not a hot potato after all, but a traveling professor. Maybe instead of slamming the door on pain, I need to throw open the door wide and say, come in, sit down with me, and don't leave until you've taught me what I need to know. I've never let myself trust love because I've never let myself trust pain. What if pain, like love, is just a place brave people visit? What if both require presence, staying on your mat and being still? I can honestly say that I have never read something more beautiful about pain before in my life. And I screenshot that a couple years ago, and I had to pull it up to remind myself that there is no stage in life that you are going through that is evidence that something is wrong with you, and that is evidence that you have failed, or evidence that you're just not getting it right. No stage in life is that for you. That every stage presents opportunities to grow and to be in an adventure and to experience the beauty of life. And the beauty of life is the spectrum of all emotions. You know, I think the thing I loved a lot when I was in church was altar call. So different churches do it differently, but the church that I was raised in, anytime we had altar call, it was just like an open invitation for you to come up to the front and to pray. And it didn't matter like what was preached about. Like in some churches, like if you're going to come to the front of the church, like something needs to be wrong with you, like this idea of fixing, right? And that's essentially what you're always trying to do. Like you go to church, you hear this preached word about how bad you're doing or how your nature is bad or how like there was never a sermon that was like, good job. You're doing a good job. You know? Like for me, and here's a lot of where the disconnect was. For me, a God that's unconditionally loving, who is forgiving, who offers grace and mercy at a consistent basis, to me, this guy is hard to please. And I say guy because he's very humanized and given many masculine characteristics in the evangelical Christian movement. So it's like, this guy's pretty hard to please. And every time I come, he doesn't necessarily have a message of love. It's a message of, get your shit together because you are fucking up. It's like every message was like that. So then, and I guess this also can lend itself for the type of leadership that you're under, right? Because any sort of church environment, all you are hearing is a text that is having a subjective interpretation then communicated to the congregation, which is why two congregations can teach on the same topic and use the same scriptures, but the tonality and the messaging behind both can be different because you have two different personalities behind a pulpit, right? Which is why people are so ingrained into that process. And I don't care how many people say get people out of the equation is people. There's no equation without people in that environment. But it depends on the type of leadership that you are under. And it depends on what that leader, what their understanding of God is, what their experience of God is. Some people, their experience with God and their experience with leadership has a lot to do with their experience with their parents and the leadership in their lives. So if their parents were assholes and that their parent, like they could never please their parents, and there's a wound there, then of course, because we're taught to relate to God as our Father, then that might be the same representation that they have of God. So God is this asshole who's never pleased, it's never enough. So then all the messaging that we're getting, and in my environment when I grew up, that was the consistent messaging. You are really fucking up. And you need to repent. So after every sermon, the thing that I loved was that sometimes it wouldn't even be the words that the preacher was saying that would make me want to cry. It would just be the general energy of the room, right? Because depending upon the sermon title or the sermon, the person who was going up and playing the keyboard, like they would play soft music, right? Like all of this is like really creating an emotional environment for you to respond. And like churches understand that. Like this is strategy. Like churches are knowing that. So they're going to sing certain songs or they're going to have the mood certain ways, right? To get a specific response. So I would go up to the altar, which is just the front of the church, and I would just cry. And it was just a release of so many pent up emotions. Now, I never allowed myself to explore what was underneath those emotions and never allowed myself to really go deep with why are these lingering feelings here and why won't they leave? Because that wasn't encouraged. The encouragement was let God fix it. Pray it away. Get rid of it. And then the evidence is now you're joyful, right? Now you leave the altar and you're happy. Because if you leave the altar, if you leave that space with the same problems you have, then you're the problem. Then something's wrong with you because it should be fixed. Because it should be as easy as you walking up and you pray and then you leave and it's fixed. And if it's not fixed, it's because you chose to hold on to it. So now you're the problem. So barring all of that, messaging, I really just enjoyed emotionally like dumping, releasing. And I remember like that became the mode. Like so many people would just go up every service and cry. And then that got judged, you know? And then like the preacher in the platform would be like, some of you just come up here every week and cry about the same things. So then it's like, even in your crying, even in your releasing, you're being judged. Oh, so I can't cry. Okay, so if I cry about it once and I pray once, I shouldn't pray about it again. And I definitely shouldn't cry about it again because I should be over it, right? Because we talked about it and I cried. So now, bam, should be done, right? It's like The same way if we move into like the more spiritual realm, the spiritual world, right? If you meditate, did you meditate? Okay. You said your affirmations. Okay. Did you walk barefoot in the grass? Okay. Did you connect with the universe? Okay, then you should be over it. And if you're not, then you're getting in your own way. When when maybe things leave our body when they're ready to leave our body. It's kind of like pooping. And let me just say I love to talk about pooping. Two of the most two of the most avoided topics, pooping and sex. And for sex, uh, it's not a to me it's the topic that we're avoiding is like the real talk about sex, not like the raunchy let's just talk about sex to make people uncomfortable, but like how powerful and spiritual and beautiful and wonderful sex is. Like we don't talk about it, and we definitely don't talk about our experiences with sexuality. But anyways, two things that we don't talk enough about, but it's like pooping, right? If we allow our digestive system to do what it needs to do, and we're feeding our body the right types of food, what will happen is that our body will tell us when it's time to go, right? But sometimes the problem is that we're not feeding ourselves the right things, or we're trying to force it. So we're taking laxatives, or we're just shoving shit in our bodies, and we are messing up the natural flow of our digestive system. The body knows, right? It knows what it has to do. Why can't the same be true for our emotional body? Why can't the same be true for the seasons of life that we're going through? The transitions. Like, don't force yourself out of a transition. Don't force yourself out of a mood. Because sometimes what that is, it is just like Glennon Doyle said. What that might be is just an invitation to just sit for a minute, to just sit with it. But we don't like that because we haven't been taught how to love and appreciate the uncomfortable emotions just as much as we've been taught to love and appreciate the emotions that are praised, because so much of what we've been taught is the demonizing of all of our natural emotions. And then the voices, the most influential voices who are supposed to be our guiding light, and they're the ones who have either appointed themselves or we've appointed them to, hey, tell us, like, give us guidance, give us direction. Even even the life that they're telling us to live, even the concepts that they're telling us to embrace at all times, they're struggling to do it themselves. So maybe this whole idea of fixing ourselves, fixing each other, is a load of bullshit. And you know what would be refreshing to me? It would be refreshing to me if some people showed up sad, genuinely sad. It would be refreshing to me if some people showed up with grief. That's another interesting aspect of emotions that I have found. After my dad died, I remember, when it initially happened, and I shared so much, and people were patient and gave their condolences because it was fresh, right? But it's like after a while, people don't want to hear about it anymore. Do you know why? It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because you are tapping into something that makes them uncomfortable in themselves, right? Like they're uncomfortable emotions. And if you're willing to share them, just like happiness is contagious, so is sadness. And people don't want to feel that. right? That's an uncomfortable emotion. So you being sad messes up the vibe because your sadness then taps into my sadness. And I don't want to touch that part. I don't want I don't like that part. Your grief makes me think about the grief that I have, maybe about people that I've lost, or thinking about my own mortality. I don't want to do that. That's bad. We got to be joyful, right? I remember when I was a kid, I cried so easily. And I was so sensitive. And I never thought anything was wrong with that. In fact, I remember my mom telling me a story when I was getting ready to go into kindergarten. I was a fresh five because my birthday is August 1st. And this is before they had specific dates before you can start kindergarten. So I started kindergarten a fresh five. Like I wasn't even a month in to my fifth year and I was going to kindergarten. And my mom told me she was so nervous. She was so nervous to send me to kindergarten because I was so sensitive. And I cried so easily. And she was like, she said, I didn't want people to take advantage of you. And I also knew that you were so sensitive that your feelings would get hurt. And I didn't want that. And because that side of us we treat so much more privately and we treat so much more vulnerably, sometimes I think it's parts of ourselves that we're scared of, and parts of ourselves that we're ashamed of, and parts of ourselves that we hide so much that we lose a part of ourselves. Because pain has just as much value as love, just like Glennon Doyle said. Pain has just as much value as love. And there's so much to learn in it. I feel like when I'm talking to people here recently, and they'll ask me, how's it going? And it just depends on how it's going that day. Some days I'll say, man, it's going good today. Feeling good. I'll say, okay, yeah, good. That's great to hear. Thank you. And then on other days, so how's it going? It's chaos. I feel like I'm going out of my mind. And I feel a little sad today. And I'll say it just like that. And the response is always like, oh, well, what can I do? What nothing. You can respond just like you did with my happiness. Well, that's good. I hope that you get everything from this moment. Thank you. And I hope the same for you. And that sounds really cold, right? Because once again, we don't need fixing. I don't need anyone to fix this for me. And I sure as hell don't need to fix it. Because what's being made of my life, what's being made of my life is something more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. And what I know about pain is that pain keeps me in a state of inner awareness of who I am and what I want. It's like you're everything slows when I'm in pain. I feel like life slows down. I get quieter. I get more reflective. I get more creative. Like so many beautiful things happen in pain. So many. And I don't want to just show up when I'm out of pain and reflect it for you and make it look really pretty and really nice. I want to present when I'm in it because I just don't see it. I don't see real life being presented in front of us. I see us living real life behind closed doors and beating ourselves up because we're not living up to what's being presented. But what's being presented is a farce, it's not real. We are all struggling. All of us are dealing with some level of pain at different magnitudes. I don't care who you value and respect and put on this fucking pedestal. No. Know that the majority of the times, especially the people that we respect the most, especially the people that we see at a certain level, know that when they go home, the struggle and the battle that they're fighting is very real. We're all in this. And I feel like the more that we talk about it, the more that we stop alienating certain emotions inside of us that are so beautiful and so essential and have so much more to teach us than goddamn happiness. Do you know how much, do you know how many gems are in your pain? Do you know how much, like, when I say that the death of my father changed my life, and I remember so many times I'd get on social media and I would write a post about where I currently was in my grief journey. And I would have this like apprehension of like, ugh, I mean the window. Like I'm at this point where people are like, all right, let's move it along. No room here. But not understanding that the person who's in it has so much more to teach me than the person who's reflecting on it from a different state. I'm not saying that the other one doesn't have value, but I'm saying that this one who's in it has just as much value. I want to hear from the people right now who feel like they're losing their mind. I want to hear from the people right now who feel like they're lonely. I want to have a conversation about it. And I want to do it without the guise of, and at the end, how are we going to fix it? Sometimes I just want to talk about it. And then at the end, it's almost like Glennon Doyle said, you stand on the sidelines and you listen to someone's pain and you just hold space for them. I remember I have this book club that I do online, and with these beautiful women. And right before one of our book clubs, I had probably one of the worst fights that I've ever had with my boyfriend. The worst. And in my head, I was like, okay, just let me text them and say I'm not going to show. Literally 5 minutes before I have to open my screen and get on Zoom. I had been crying, like I was emotionally tapped. He had stormed out. And for some reason, I was like, all right. I open my computer, Zoom starts, and I get the smile. Hi. Hi guys. You know how we do. And like one of my friends, she said that the leader of the group, she was like, how are you? And I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. And she was like, okay. So did you want to tell us how you are really? And I love her so much for asking it a second time. And I said, if I say how I am really, I'm going to cry and I'm not going to be able to stop. And the thing I love about her and I love about this group is that she said, okay, well, we're here. We don't need to talk about the book. This is more important. We're here. And for the next hour and a half, I talked. And then it stopped being about the argument with my boyfriend to me and how I was feeling and what was going on with my life. And I just keep crying and they're listening and they were just, asking some follow-up questions, and encouraging me. And at the end of the call, both of them just thanked me for allowing them to hold space for me. It wasn't okay, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? Because once you close this computer, now you can be good, because you let it out and we told you what you need to do, They just held space. They didn't make me feel like something was wrong with me. They didn't make me feel like I was a charity case. They didn't make me feel like I inconvenienced them or inconvenienced the group. Why can't we do that more in our personal lives, on social media, at our jobs, with our friends? Why can't we just let people be themselves fully without trying to fix them or change them into a version that makes us most comfortable? Even I was reading this book, and this lady was talking about parenting, compassionate parenting. And she was saying that a lot of times we, a lot of times parents, because their children's out of control emotions trigger something in them, right? So it's like you're screaming at the top of your lungs and that's triggering something in me, whether that be my own emotions that I feel like they're bubbling up or my frustration. So all I want you to do is stop. So what we do to children is instead of taking that moment of emotion and first of all encouraging them to let it out in a more healthy way, whatever that looks like, so they're not like, destroying things, but not making that child ashamed of that emotion for shaming them for having that emotion, no matter how chaotic, right? But allowing them to have those emotional reactions without discouraging it and without making that child feel like your tears and your anger, your frustration, they're inconvenient to me right now and inconvenient for this moment. So shut it up. Stop crying. Get over it. Right? And if you hear that enough as a child, then as an adult, you then do it to your kids, and then you do it to the people in your general surroundings. But most of all, you do it to yourself. Nobody wants to hear about my stuff. Like, nobody really cares. They just want me to shut up, bring the fun, bring the good. But don't bring that. That makes me uncomfortable. I don't know the specific answer to this. But I do know that I genuinely value the people in my life who don't try to fix me. Because I spent 33 years trying to be fixed. By myself, by the leaders of the church, by dogmatic religion, by the version of God I was fed. I was always trying to be fixed. Go up there and have someone lay their hands on you, right? That was the magic. If a minister laid his hands on you and spoke, you're healed. And if you leave and you're not healed, it's because you didn't have enough faith. You were supposed to be fixed in that moment. I don't want to be fixed. I like being broken sometimes. I think being broken is okay. Because sometimes when you're broken, the things that you tried to hide, the things that you've shoved down, when you're broken, they come out. And now you get to see a different side of yourself. And then you get to do the beautiful work of putting yourself back together. But this time you get to decide what stays out and what goes in. That's a beautiful process. How much silent pain are we going through because we refuse to make our pain public? How much silent pain are we enduring because we spend so much time trying to silence or cover or muffle our pain? I don't want to do it. And I hope you don't want to either. I feel like we're living in chaotic times. Life feels chaotic. Outside of my personal experience, just like life in general feels somewhat chaotic. And I think it serves the collective to just be honest with where we're at. And if you're happy, I celebrate it. And I'm excited for you and for your life. And if you're sad, and if you're lonely, and if you feel broken, then I'm happy for that. Because you've entered the classroom. You're being taught something. Sometimes happiness doesn't really teach us anything. Because sometimes in our happiness, we're just loud. We're moving, we're doing, we're going. Life is like flowing. This is great. And there's a time for that, right? It's great. But as much as we celebrate the time for happiness, I want to celebrate the time for pain. Personally, I cherish this time with myself. I celebrate this time with myself because something beautiful is being created in the pain. And I hope the same for you. And I hope that you don't default this period of your time because it's inconvenient for you and inconvenient for the people around you. And if it's inconvenient for the people around you, get other people around you. I just want you to know that I see you. And I'm holding space for you and for your pain. And as a collective, and I stand on the sidelines because you don't need to be fixed. And I'm cheering you on as you move through this phase and this transition of your life. And I'm here to remind you that nothing lasts forever. And even though times of transition and pain are sometimes harder, actually always harder than times of joy and happiness, something beautiful is being worked out in your life. So allow the beauty to unfold naturally. Don't force it. Surrender to it. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you all so much for the support and the encouragement that I've received over the years of just getting on here and talking and sharing my heart and talking to other people. When you free your story, you free your life. But also when you free your story, you give other people permission to free their lives. I'll see you on the next episode.